Hi, welcome to Losing Faith, Finding Spirit. I want to talk about some self-blamers, those of us who have been in codependent and abusive, emotionally abusive, narcissistic, toxic relationships and are either out of them or working through our own internal self-healing. So, if you are a self-blamer, we've talked about how sometimes people in abusive relationships tend to hold on all the emotional blame. They tend to make excuses for their partners and for the people who have caused them pain, and basically feel like it's their fault, that the things are happening because somehow it's their fault. And that's a coping mechanism because you're trying to get control over an uncontrollable situation. So the question I want to pose to you today, as a self-blamer, do you find that you hold yourself to an impossible standard while making every excuse and concession for the people in your life, the people who are mistreating you in your life? If you answer yes, it's time to give yourself a little mercy. It's time to give yourself and extend yourself that grace and forgiveness that you've been given to everyone else in your life. You are allowed to make mistakes. When you're in these kinds of relationships, it really makes you feel like you can't make a mistake because you don't know what's going to happen if you mess up. If you say one thing and do the other, you feel like you're the hypocrite because the person you're living with is such a hypocrite, and they do that all of the time, that if you fall below a certain level in your mind, you think that you've fallen to their level, and two, they use that against you. In my experience, if I stayed up late to take care of a project, or because I was reading a really interesting book and I couldn't put it down, I felt like I wasn't allowed to tell my ex to come to bed. You know what I mean? Because, like, how dare I say, like, please come to bed. I miss that you aren't sleeping in the same bed with me, or it's time for bed. Like, you said you need to take care of your health. Like, this is one of the things you said was your goal. No, I couldn't say that because I stayed up late reading a book. I had to live this, like, perfect, can't make any flaws. I can't have any extra stuff. Like, it can't deviate. It has to be straight and narrow. It has to be perfect all of the time. If I yell, if I raise my voice, then I'm giving him an excuse to do the same and to treat me the same. When really, like, I had been pushed to the brink and there was nothing left, right? And because he would say, like, you yelling, you're doing this, like, you're so immature. So it would get thrown back at me. Every mistake that you make when you're a self-blamer and you're in these abusive relationships, when you are a victim of emotional abuse, every mistake you make is a weapon against you that your abuser uses to keep you small, to keep you afraid. And so you become this person who feels like they have to live at this level that nobody can live in. Nobody can live in that. So having a child has helped me kind of be a little bit more gracious to myself, because kids make mistakes. That's what they do. They learn, they grow. And if I don't allow for those mistakes and the natural consequences, my child isn't going to learn and grow. My child's going to think that everything gets done for them. So I try to make a lot of effort to make sure that my child feels that there's some room for mistakes. And yeah, there are consequences to those mistakes, but I try not to make such a big deal about it, unlike how I grew up. And it started with my parents. It was a very authoritative growing up. There was not allowed any mistakes. And then also the religious aspects of it, because growing up in the evangelical Christian church, there was even thinking bad thoughts, sinful thoughts was considered a sin and you were going to hell. So I had this impossible standard ingrained in my foundation as a child through my parents and through the church. So when I got into an abusive marriage and relationship, I was just stressing myself, burning myself out to live this impossible, perfect life. And I couldn't do it. And so when I messed up, it was like I was the hardest person on myself. And my ex didn't care. I mean, and he'd be like, You don't have to keep the dishes clean all the time. You know why he said that? So that he didn't have to do the dishes. And so that if I needed dishes done, he could say, well, you don't keep the dishes clean. So I felt that. I felt this constant like comparison all the time. Like we were competing all of the time. And so if you make one mistake, they can make 20. Like that's kind of like how it is. Or if you make one mistake, then they feel like it gives them narcissistic supply, because then they feel like they're the bigger, better person because you messed up. Never mind the fact that they're always doing these terrible things and being a hypocrite. Like your one little mistake will be held against you for a very long time. It's ridiculous. And you hold it against you because you feel that. That's been the cycle. That's been the pattern, is that if you make a mistake, then it's going to be weaponized. So you already know that the weapon's coming and you're already tense and feeling that. So then you try to make yourself perfect. So the thing I want to tell you, get to your healing, is to give yourself some room for mistakes. Stop being perfect. You got to let it go. You are going to burn yourself out. I have already burned myself out. I think I've given myself some health issues for sure. And I don't want that for you. Think of how you treat everyone else. A lot of people in these relationships are very empathetic, very understanding, very forgiving and patient. I mean, if we weren't, we wouldn't be putting up with this as long as we have, right? You wouldn't put up with somebody treating you the way that you are being treated if you weren't a patient, kind, empathetic, loving person. You need to take all of that patience. You need to take all of that kindness. You need to take all that empathy and give it to yourself. Give it to yourself. Think of yourself as a small child. Give yourself a hug. Tell yourself all the things you wish you had heard. Let your small child tell you how strong you are. Let your small child tell you how brave you are. Let yourself get the forgiveness and grace and mercy that you give to everyone else. Give yourself that. It takes time. It's not going to happen overnight, because you've built layer upon layer of this kind of blame and remorse and regret and this weight and this guilt and shame. It takes time to work through those. But if you can, just try very hard. Try to not judge yourself, and try not to hold yourself to such an impossible standard. Try not to hold yourself so high. Allow yourself some grace. Allow yourself some mercy. Give yourself some wiggle room, some learning room. You are relearning things too. Especially if you're out of the relationship, it's going to take some time to heal. You're going to be relearning all of those false beliefs and things that held you captive in the relationship. And that's going to be the grace that you need to have. You need to be able to see how messed up it was and not get mad at yourself and not demean yourself. You've already lived that. You've been cut down and belittled enough and invalidated enough. Give yourself some validation. Let yourself know that you've suffered. And of course, anybody in that situation would have felt and done something similar. It's okay. And what you feel, what you experienced was real. I believe you. And I believe that it's time for you to love yourself and let go of some of that. And take it slow. It's okay if it takes a time. You don't have to do everything all at once. I know we also, if you're like me, you feel like you got to get it done. Like it needs to be done already. That's not how it works, unfortunately. Even when you have a sickness in your body, you have to take medicine and it takes time. Even a cold can take up to 2 weeks to get out of your system. The emotional abuse that you've suffered, especially if you were in a long-term relationship like I was, or had a history of it in your childhood, it's going to take a long time to unlearn that and to heal from that. And it's okay. You are going to feel so much better each day. Each day gets better and better. And I know that if you would treat yourself with that same forgiveness and mercy and that you give to others, you are going to start making some great progress in your healing journey. And I hope you find some peace today. And I hope this finds you well. Thank you for listening. Bye.